My name is Elias, and this is my story. I was born in lands now known as Lebanon, in the ancient city of Baalbek, at a time when kings bowed before idols of stone and wood. Descendant of Harun, brother of Moses, I found myself in a world where true faith struggled to breathe amidst pagan rituals. The reign of Ahab was particularly challenging. Temples to Baal dominated the landscapes, and monotheism, Tawhid, seemed like a flickering flame in danger of extinguishing. My earliest memories are a jumble of bustling markets, priests chanting strange hymns, and a sky that, though vast and clear, seemed distant from the concerns of my people. From a young age, I felt a special connection to the Creator. The stories of my uncle Moses, who freed our people from slavery in Egypt, nourished my soul. I knew I was called to something great, something beyond the everyday tasks of my family and my people. The day my mission was revealed was like any other, until it wasn't. The sun had set, and I was meditating on the outskirts of the city. The voice of God resonated within me, a powerful whisper that shook my being. "Ilyas," he said, "you will be my messenger. You will bring the truth of my ownness to your people and steer them away from their worship of false gods." The revelation filled me with a divine purpose, but also with reverential fear. How could I, a mere man, stand against the tide of idolatry rooted in the hearts of Bani Israel? Despite my doubts, my faith in God was unshakable. The next day, with the dawn as witness to my new life, I began my mission. I went to gathering places where the people of Baalbek traded, debated, and lived their daily lives. "Listen," I cried out, "there is only one God, the Creator of all. These statues cannot benefit or harm you. Let us return to Him and abandon these empty practices." My words were like drops in an ocean of disbelief. Some ignored me, others mocked. "Do you know more than our kings and priests?" they challenged. Yet, I did not lose heart. I knew my path would be filled with obstacles, but I was also convinced that truth would eventually prevail. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I continued my work, speaking in markets and gatherings, even in front of the temples. My message was simple but powerful. There is only one God, and He alone deserves our worship. Over time, some began to listen. They saw in my words a truth their hearts recognized. These early sparks of faith gave me hope, but at the same time, they stirred the anger of those in power. It was then that I faced my first great challenge. The dawn in Baalbek brought not only the sunlight but also the renewal of my commitment. As the city awakened, I traversed its streets, determined to share the divine message. In those days, my voice often competed with the bustle of the markets and the clamor of everyday life. Although many listened, few truly heard. With every word I spoke, I felt like I was sowing seeds in arid soil. "O people of Bani Israel," I exclaimed, "let us return to true faith. There is no God but Allah, and the path of idolatry will only lead us to ruin." Some stopped, curious, while others passed by without paying heed to my words. Soon, the authorities of Baalbek began to notice my presence. The priests of Baal, with their robes and ornaments, looked upon me with disdain. "This man disturbs the peace," they said, "and challenges the traditions our ancestors have bequeathed to us." But I sought not conflict, but enlightenment, not to dishonor the past, but to guide towards a future of true devotion to God. One day, while speaking near the great temple of Baal, a group of priests approached me. "Elias," they said with a mixture of curiosity and challenge, "your words are strong, but do they have the backing of the heavens? If your God is so powerful, let Him demonstrate His supremacy over Baal." I knew this was a crucial moment, not just for me, but for the faith of an entire people. I raised my hands to the sky and prayed. I prayed for God to show His sign, not for my glory, but to open the eyes of my people. In that instant, a gust of wind shook the temple, and clouds quickly gathered, darkening the sun. A sudden and intense rain fell upon Baalbek, unusual for that time of year. The people looked on in astonishment. The priests were speechless. This miracle changed some hearts, but many still clung to their old beliefs. Yet I knew my duty was to continue, regardless of doubts and challenges. With each dawn, my determination grew stronger, and with each sunset, I reflected on the day's lessons. The stories of my confrontations with the priests and my miracles spread, along with the message I had come to deliver. Though many resisted, there were also those whose hearts opened to the truth of Tawhid. These brave souls became my companions and support, helping me bring God's light to the darkest corners of Bani Israel. As my mission progressed, people's reactions varied greatly. Some listened attentively, others mocked or grew angry. But regardless of their reactions, my commitment remained firm. God is patient and merciful, I constantly reminded myself, and so must I be. There came a moment when my message became impossible to ignore, even for King Ahab. The authorities, both religious and political, began to see me not only as a nuisance preacher but as a true threat to their power and influence. Yet my faith and trust in God were unshakable, and I was prepared to face whatever challenges awaited me. My struggle against idolatry in Baalbek intensified each day. As my message spread, so did the resistance. It was not merely a battle of words. It was a clash of beliefs, a confrontation between ancient tradition and the pure truth of Tawhid. The priests of Baal, backed by King Ahab, began organizing campaigns against me. My teachings were distorted, presented as an attack on the culture and stability of Bani Israel. This man seeks to destroy our traditions, they cried, and with them, our identity as a people. But I knew my struggle was not against the culture or history of my people, but against the false beliefs that had led them astray from God. The streets that once greeted me with indifference now often echoed with hostility. Where there was curiosity, now there was mistrust. Every day, I faced ridicule, threats, and even attempts to silence me. But my faith in God and His message gave me strength to carry on. Though I face adversity, I thought, I am on the path that God has laid out for me. In my effort to guide my people, I performed miracles that evidenced the power of God. I healed the sick, gave hope to the desperate, and revealed truths that only a messenger of God could know. But despite these clear signs, many hearts remained closed to the truth. One day, while I was in the main square, a group of priests confronted me directly. If you are truly a prophet, they challenged, perform a miracle before our eyes, and we will believe in you. I raised my prayers to God, seeking His guidance and help. Suddenly, the sky darkened, and a lightning bolt illuminated the sky, followed by a deafening thunder. The people around stood in awe. Some fell to their knees, while others fled in fear. However, even after this miracle, the most hardened hearts refused to accept the truth. They accused me of sorcery and manipulating natural events to deceive the people. Frustration grew in my heart, but I never lost hope. God guides whom He wills, I reminded myself, and my duty is simply to deliver His message. King Ahab, seeing the effect my presence had on the city, decided to confront me. He summoned me to his palace, a lavish place that starkly contrasted with the simplicity of my life and teachings. "Ilyas," he said with a voice that mixed curiosity with disdain, "your actions are causing disturbances. Why do you challenge our traditions and our gods?" My response was clear and fearless. "O king, I seek not conflict but truth. The idols your people worship cannot hear nor respond. There is only one true God, and it is to Him we must worship. I invite you and your people to abandon these false beliefs and follow the path of truth and light." The king, in his arrogance, rejected my words. He warned me to abandon my mission or face grave consequences. As I left the palace, I knew the days ahead would be even more difficult. But I also knew that my faith in God and His message would be my guide and my protection. In those days of challenge and rejection, my determination did not waver, but my heart was filled with sorrow for my people. I watched as they drifted further and further from the truth, immersed in their idolatrous practices, rejecting the signs that God showed them through me. I reached a point where I knew that only a more drastic divine intervention could make them reflect and return to the right path. With deep sadness, but with a firm conviction that it was necessary, I knelt and prayed to God. I asked for an unmistakable sign, something that would shake the very roots of their disbelief and lead them back to Him. My request was heard, and a divine punishment fell upon Baalbek, a famine. The skies, which once poured their rain at just my prayer, now closed up. Not a single drop fell. The fields dried up, the rivers dwindled, and the crops failed. The famine spread like a dark cloak over the land, bringing with it suffering and despair. Day after day, I watched as my people suffered. The famine, which I had invoked in an act of desperate hope, was now a palpable reality, a testament to their stubbornness and the power of God. My heart ached for them, but I knew that this suffering was necessary for their spiritual awakening. As the months passed, despair grew. The people who had once scorned and mocked me now came to me for guidance and comfort. Elias, man of God, they said, "What must we do to end this drought? How can we appease your God?" My answer was always the same: return to God, the one and true, and abandon your idols that cannot help you in these times of need. Finally, after long and difficult months, the change began to manifest. The people of Baalbek, battered by adversity, began to open their hearts. The idols were abandoned, and prayers to God, the One, echoed in the streets that were once filled with chants to Baal. It was an astonishing change, a testimony to the power of God and the ability of human suffering to lead to reflection and repentance. With the repentance of the people, my heart filled with hope. Once again, I knelt and prayed, this time not to ask for punishment, but for mercy. I prayed for rain, for relief for my people, for a sign that God had accepted their repentance. And then, as if the floodgates of heaven had opened, the rain fell. It was a rejuvenating downpour, bringing life to the dry land and hope to the afflicted hearts. People cried and laughed at the same time, raising their hands in gratitude. The famine had ended, and with it, a hard but necessary lesson had been learned. This experience left an indelible mark on Baalbek and on my own life. It demonstrated God's unwavering faithfulness to those who turn to Him, and the reality that sometimes it is in the midst of the deepest tribulation where we find our truest faith. The rain, falling upon Baalbek after months of drought, was like a hymn of divine mercy. As I watched the people rejoice under the downpour, my heart was filled with gratitude and relief. The repentance of my people had been sincere, and God, in His infinite mercy, had responded. The streets of the city, which once witnessed arrogance and idolatry, now transformed into scenes of humility and devotion. Temples that had housed idols now emptied, replaced by prayers to Allah, the one and true. It was a spiritual rebirth, a return to the faith that our ancestors, like Harun and Moses, had taught. In this renewed atmosphere, my role as God's messenger strengthened. People came to me not only seeking spiritual guidance, but also advice on everyday matters. I became a symbol of God's mercy and power, a living reminder that true faith has transformative power. But despite this spiritual revival, there was a part of me that knew the human heart is prone to forgetfulness. I remembered God's words, warning me about the fluctuating nature of human faith. With each passing day, this concern grew in my mind. Will my people remain faithful to their repentance? I wondered. Meanwhile, I seized every opportunity to strengthen the people's faith. I spoke to them about the importance of staying steadfast on God's path, how idolatry had led us to calamity, and how true repentance had saved us. I saw in the eyes of my listeners a gleam of understanding, a spark of true devotion. It was in those moments of teaching and guidance that I performed some of the most memorable miracles. God had granted me the ability to heal the sick and, at times, even to bring the dead back to life. These acts of divine power reinforced the people's faith and served as tangible reminders of God's omnipotence. However, over time, the memory of the famine and the fear it had generated began to fade. The old practices, though diminished, started to resurface in the dark corners of Baalbek. I watched as some gradually returned to their old ways, seduced by traditions and the comforts of the familiar. My heart saddened to see this regression. Despite the miracles, teachings, and mercy they had experienced, some of my compatriots were slipping back into idolatry. It was a constant struggle, a reminder that God's guidance is a gift, but staying on the straight path is a choice that each person must make for themselves. Despite the miracle of the rain and the brief spiritual awakening that followed, my heart anguished as I saw some of my compatriots beginning to stray again towards idolatry. The memory of the famine and the fear of divine wrath faded, and with them, the renewed commitment to Tawhid. It was as if the lessons learned were dissolving like drops in a river of forgetfulness. The return to old practices was not immediate but gradual. Small altars to Baal and other idols began to appear in hidden corners of Baalbek. The prayers and repentance that once filled the streets gave way to whispers of ancient rituals. This resurgence of idolatry was not only a betrayal of God's teachings, but also of the promise my people had made during the dark days of famine. I watched with a heavy heart as the light of faith that had shone so brightly began to fade. Doubts began to assail me. Was my effort in vain? I wondered, is this the inevitable nature of man, to always return to his old ways, no matter how much truth is revealed to him? My despair grew day by day. The pain of seeing my people relapse into idolatry was unbearable. I had dedicated my life to guiding them towards the truth, to showing them the path to the one true God. And yet here they were, reverting to their old practices. I felt that I had failed in my mission, that everything I had worked to build was crumbling before my eyes. It was in the midst of this profound desolation that I turned to God with a different prayer. I no longer asked for guidance or help for my people, but something much more personal. In my desperation and pain, I prayed for death. I felt I could no longer bear to witness my people's continuous betrayal of God. "O Lord," I cried, "take me to you, for I can no longer bear to see my people's continual disobedience." But instead of death, God granted me another answer. In a moment of deep and comforting revelation, I understood that my time on earth was not yet over. God had other plans for me. Instead of granting me the death I sought, He lifted me up. I was taken to heaven, not to escape my people's suffering, but to serve as an eternal reminder of God's mercy and patience. My ascension to heaven was a miracle that left an indelible mark on Baalbek and the generations that followed. Although physically I was no longer among my people, my story and teachings continued to live on. They became a beacon of faith, a reminder that despite human weaknesses, God remains ever merciful and patient. My story did not end with my ascension to heaven. In fact, it was there that a new stage began, both for me and for my legacy on earth. Although my physical presence was no longer among my people, the miracles I had performed and the teachings I had imparted continued to resonate in Baalbek and beyond. The accounts of my miracles, especially those where I healed the sick and at times brought the dead back to life, became legends that inspired faith and hope. These stories were passed down from generation to generation, each tale strengthening the message of monotheism and God's mercy. My legacy was not limited to miraculous feats. The lessons I imparted, based on the worship of one God and the importance of obedience and faith, became pillars for those seeking truth. In moments of doubt or despair, my people remembered my words and found comfort and direction. Over time, my story became intertwined with the narratives of other prophets, both in Islamic teachings and in Christian traditions. In the Quran, I am remembered as a man of great moral stature, an example of virtue and dedication. In the Bible, known as Elijah, my role as a powerful prophet and defender of the faith is equally prominent. My ascension to heaven became a subject of great fascination and speculation. Some believe that I am still alive, waiting for the appointed time by God to return and continue my mission. Others see my ascension as the symbolic end of my earthly journey, a step towards an eternal existence alongside God. Regardless of the interpretations, my story serves as a reminder that true faith can withstand the harshest trials. In moments of despair, my prayer for death and God's response demonstrate that even in our deepest weakness, God is present, offering a path to redemption and peace. My life, struggles, and triumphs remain relevant today. They serve as inspiration for those facing adversity, reminding them that faith in God is an endless source of strength and hope. My message, centered on the unity of God and the importance of obedience to His will, continues to be a beacon of light in a world often confused and fragmented. Through my story, the human nature is revealed in its constant search for meaning and truth. It shows that despite our tendencies to stray and forget, there is always an opportunity for repentance and return to true faith. And most importantly, it teaches that God's mercy is infinite, always available to those who sincerely seek His face.